Hello and welcome to Colour Multimedia Enterprises. My name is Luke, also known as Tianery, and in this video I'm going to show you a preview of the current version of StoryDev 2. Now, I'm not going to be releasing it just yet because not all of the features are currently implemented, but I'd just like to show you a bit about the progress of this project and where it is currently going. So, a lot of you have probably been wondering, oh, I've created lots and lots of videos about StoryDev 2 in the past and it hasn't really been going anywhere. There's a reason for that. That's because for a very long time I haven't really been satisfied with the way that I was creating StoryDev 2, and in particular the original StoryDev is, for a lot of people, it's probably going to be very much the case of learning how to use an editor. With StoryDev 2 and with a lot of interactive story engines out there, it normally comes with some kind of syntax that you have to learn, and more often than not that would then allow you to create an interactive story using that sort of basic syntax. And this is the kind of approach that I'm doing here as well. I'm going to be using this sort of language that is parsed in the engine and is then shown a bit later. Now I'm going to go through the syntax in a little bit, but first of all I'd just like to show you how it currently works in the engine itself. So here is here it is basically what it currently looks like in HTML5. So this is in Chrome. So as you saw earlier, there was a bit of text on the screen. It goes through pretty much each individual narrative and dialogue. There was also a percentage mark at the top, if you remember, and there was the name of the character as well as the color in which to highlight that character's name. So that's the color, which is sort of a light green there. Obviously she's saying shh is okay. Sanya picks up her 1-year-old sister and starts feeding her. Caroline stops crying. And then you go through the dialogue, and if we go through it, there's not much story in this at the moment. It's going to be for a video game called Fall of Atlantis. But we go through here, as you just saw, there was that 9 years later bit. There's a curly sort of, I can't remember what the name of the symbol, if I may be honest, but it's an accent, I think some people call it, and then you type in 9 years later, and that's what showed there. So a knock comes at Sanya's door. Caroline can now talk because obviously she's 10 years old and Sanya's 14. So we go through here. Now, here, this robed man, I should really change that because that's terrible grammar, but basically what was here was a dollar gender. So the engine basically, it takes a look wherever a dollar sign is and it identifies, okay, this is obviously a variable that is going to be parsed at some point. Now, code was executed before this narrative actually came up, so it was executed, gender was assigned a value, and that value was then displayed in the narrative where that dollar gender was. So that's now showing man there. If we go through here, it says, then says, who are you? Okay, so I am going to type in my nickname, which is Tianery. My name is Tianery. So it's doing that dollar sign bit there. Now if I click on next, it's now showing me a series of choices. Ask about training, compliment her looks, refer to Jahia even. Now these two don't work because I don't have conversations for those two. If I just click on them, it doesn't do anything. But if I go to ask about training, it then says, do you know where the training grounds are for clerics? Or that's what I say technically. Now that cleric bit, that is also a value which I pass into the interpreter, that then it understands what that is. Click on next. Now this doesn't quite work yet. she's basically telling directions for two completely different roles there. Now for lore gatherers and clerics, which are basically the two main, or two of the main classes that you can choose in this game, she'll say, oh, you need to go to the Great Library, which is 3 blocks to the left of me, follow the road down, and the first door to the right is the building entrance. And otherwise, if you choose to become a monk, or a monk, then she says, oh, you need to go to the Halls of Light. But that doesn't quite 100% work yet. And then you go back to those choices again. Now, there's another thing that also exists in the syntax, which again I will go through. So let's go back to the syntax and go through exactly what everything is doing. Okay, so I'm going to start from the very top and work my way down. So at the top, as you can see, we've got this percentage sign. I will probably change this at some point, and basically what that's basically indicating is a character definition. I want to define a character. The character name has to be between speech marks, otherwise you get a runtime error. Eventually there'll be a compile time error because this will all be macro based, but for now it's just runtime. And then you pass in a color which starts with the hash or pound, depending on if you're American or not. And we've also got the actual hexadecimal value, so it can be 3 or it can be 6. It really doesn't matter as long as it is a valid HTML5 color. Because it's HTML5, we need to make sure it's actually HTML5. And also HTML5 is the only target I'm testing on at the moment, so it doesn't work on any other target. So we've got Jahia, Sanya and Caroline. Jahia being blue, Sanya bright green, and Caroline slightly darker green. Okay, so here we've got a $sign, and in speech marks we've got the value start. Now this is a conversation definition, and that defines, okay, I want to start a new conversation here called start, right? And anything on the right, or rather left, of a colon is narrative. If something exists on the right of the colon, then it assumes there's going to be a character name there. If it doesn't find that character name, either you spelt it wrong or you just didn't define it at all. So it'll come up with an error, and then it will just stop parsing at that point, right? Actually, it won't just stop parsing at that point. It'll continue parsing, and it'll show you all of the errors within it before it then continues. So she says, it's okay if you remember correctly, back in the other portion of the video. Go down here, we've got this accent here. If you remember, we had that 9 years later, just fade in and out. And then we've also got this exclamation. Now the exclamation indicates a script, and this is what it's doing. So it's assigning a new variable called gender, and it is going to be an empty string. Then we're going to check to see if the value sex is either male or female, and then we assign gender man, gender is equal to woman. And then as we go through here, when it detects this $sign, right, it's going to find that variable gender and replace it with the value. So if you remember, it was man. If we go to main.ajax, so this is the actual implementation of the engine inside of our own sort of custom template, let's say. Eventually some parts of this template, if not all of it, will in fact be added into the core of the engine as a basic template anyway, so you'll be able to use this with some things removed. So this bit here, the sex and the role, will be removed from it. The show character input will remain there because I think that's quite useful, particularly since name and things like variables like auto are reserved as part of the engine, but I'll go into that a bit later. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this code because I'll actually make a video a lot later once this engine is complete on how you can build your own template. So I'm just basically showing you exactly what this code looks like. So let's go back into here. So Sanya then says, who are you? And then, as you saw just now, if we go back into here, we've got the show character input. And if you remember when we were in the other portion of the video, basically we wanted to say show character input and then auto is equal to false. Now auto is a variable inside of the core engine, and automatically go on to the next narrative. So if you remember when we clicked next, when Sanya said we will soon find out, auto is by default true, meaning that it executed this and then it went straight onto the narrative. It didn't wait around. You're not waiting around for this. You don't have to press next again in order to get to the next narrative. So it feels as if this code never executed, even though it did. But in this case here, because we say auto is equal to false, we don't actually get this immediately after it's executed, which is not what we want, which is why we set auto to false. We show the character input, then once that has in fact been executed, we then move on to the next part, right? And then we say auto is equal to true again after that to make sure that we do in fact, when we press next after saying my name is whatever, Tianery, then it actually in fact goes back to being a bit smoother again. Now, when we get to this bit here, Sanya looks confused. We've got this double colon here, which says asking Sanya, which is basically saying go to this conversation. Now, as you saw, as soon as that came up, we immediately got those choices. And that's because when we get to here, that's basically saying, okay, we want this portion, this narrative, to basically go to the next conversation. So we don't have to click next in order to go to the next conversation. It just automatically knows that this does, that the next command in the list is in fact a go to command to the next conversation. So it automatically goes there without having to click next. So it will actually show you all of the choices that are available. And these are the choices. Now, as you can see, there's only one conversation link being linked in this choice. But that was primarily for, what am I saying? That was primarily for demonstration purposes. Now, if you also see here, down here, we've got this, do you know where the training grounds are for roles? Now, this $sign obviously is finding role. Now, as you saw, if you remember correctly, there was a value we saw, do you know where the training grounds are for clerics, right? Now, this backslash, what it's doing is it's cancelling out the following letter, because we do not want that letter to be captured by the engine. So what that's doing is it's capturing this bit here and not this as well. So it will detect that backslash, it will cancel it out, and when that backslash is in fact detected, what it's going to do is it's going to replace that backslash and just remove it entirely, right? So then whatever that value is then gets combined with that S at the end, and then it just says clerics as if it's just one word, right? Now, this bit here, in fact, I actually didn't talk about this double underscore thing here. So basically what double underscore does is it's basically telling the engine, I want to get a value from the interpreter and place it here as if it is a character name, right? So that's what that's doing there. So you could play around with changing character names. So you could make a character name that changes over the course of the story for whatever reason. You might have that in case someone changes their identity for whatever reason. So that can be quite useful. So yeah, these things here, these double exclamation marks, obviously that doesn't quite work, because obviously, as you saw earlier, this was appearing, then this. That doesn't quite work properly. What this is basically doing is, it is a conditional, or what will become a conditional flow. Now, these single exclamation marks, that does not affect the flow of the conversation. But these double colons here do, or at least it's supposed to. Not yet. So what it's going to do is, when that double colon is detected, it is going to detect each command next, and these commands then become code. So this will instead, in fact, translate to something like say, followed by the name of the character. So that would be wrapped into here like that. Then you would have this like that. So basically, that's what it will look like once it's interpreted by the engine, but obviously not right now. And then obviously it will do all of that until it sees another double exclamation mark that doesn't have anything else there, right? And then it will end the conversation. And then we've also got that go-to thing. Now, talking about choices, we've got this equals sign here. Probably wondering what that is. We've got this thing called exclusive. Now, basically what that's doing is, it's basically telling the engine, I want all of the choices within this conversation to be exclusive. That is, if I've already clicked on one of them, I don't want to go back to this conversation and whatever the one I've clicked on will be removed. I don't want to see that option again, basically. That's what that's exclusive is basically saying. Another thing that you might notice, which doesn't technically work just yet, is when we do go to another conversation, the current conversation doesn't actually clear. Now, eventually, that's actually going to be turned into an option called no clear. Now, basically, everything after the equals is called a conversation option. It basically tells the engine, I want this conversation to do something, right? So it's basically giving you the option to change the behavior of that conversation. Now, what that no clear would do, so by default, what conversations will do is, when you go to another conversation, it will clear the current conversation and then go to the next one, just as you would expect if you were to go to another conversation, right? But if you say no clear, you're basically saying, do not clear the current conversation. I want it to remain there because I want to create the illusion that we're still in the same conversation, right? So that's what that's doing, or what it will eventually do, rather. And yeah, so that's pretty much a preview of how StoryDev 2 is currently working and what will work eventually. So I am going to leave it there for this video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. And once this engine has been in fact completed, I'll then create a series of tutorials going through each of the individual things that you can do with this engine, creating conversations, narratives, that sort of thing. And yeah, pretty much. And there's also going to be an editor as well. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time.